It obviously this wasn't as big of a year as 2023 was, and I say that only because the top blockbuster films of that year were, like stuff like Oppenheimer and Barbie, like films that were, that would be considered like award-worthy films that did end up getting nominated for Best Picture, and also just films in general that I liked. This year, not so much. Like, what did you have for like the top contenders of the box office? You had Inside Out 2, which I thought was okay. Like, it was very underwhelming compared to the first film. You have Moana 2, which I found even more underwhelming. You had Deadpool and Wolverine, which I did like. I did think was fun, but I found fun in kind of like a roasting of Marvel sort of way, and not for too much else more than that. And then there was also like films like Wicked, which I did enjoy. Wicked was fun, and it'll probably get some bigger nominations. And I think if there's a theme to my favorite films of this year, I think it's mostly just like a frustration and anger, I think is what ran through a lot of like my favorite films this year. And it's one of those things that I kind of just realized as I got to the end of the year and I looked at like my top films. It's like, oh yeah, these are all films where characters kind of more or less have a breakdown and are just angry and frustrated with the world. So I guess that's one way to paint 2024, considering all the frustrations we had this year. So yeah, I'll just run through my through my top 10 here. So at number 10, I put an animated film. And this year, in particular, like I said, Inside Out 2 was underwhelming. Moana 2 was underwhelming. So if you were to look at that, you would think that this was a bad year for animation. And it wasn't if you looked in the right places. And what I mean by that, basically, is that if you looked abroad, you would find much better films. Like we did have a very good film with The Wild Robot. I really did love that cute dream. Well, it's cute, but also a very meaningful DreamWorks film, very poignant at times. It was a great film. But if you look abroad, there were much better animated films that came out from all the corners of the world. You had you had the Latvian film of Flow, which is about a bunch of animals connecting during a flood. Beautiful visuals. I love the fact that the animals are just animals. If you went over to France, you had a Chicken for Linda, which was a fairly cute, if not meandering, animated film about just a girl who wants chicken for dinner. And it relates to like her late father, but it's mostly just about the madcap humor that happens with acquiring that chicken. And there was also even some decent anime that came out, like it was like Look Inside and the Colors Within, which was a fairly like soft and light fluffy dose of a coming of age drama about starting up a band of all things. Very cute stuff. But my choice for my favorite animated film at number 10 on my list is Memoir of a Snail from Australia. So this is a stop motion animated film from Adam Elliott, who previously did Mary and Max, and it's that same level of like bittersweet, dramedy, but dialed up to 11. Like, this is very much like Elliott made a fantastic film with Mary and Max, and this film is even better. Because Memoir of a Snail, it's all about Grace Puddle and her problems of just struggling to grow up, where she's separated by her brother, where unfortunate circumstances force them apart, and it makes her relationship suffer. She tries to connect with people, but for every problem she has, there's like a little bit of like joy. It becomes like an emotional roller coaster. Like, she connects with an old woman, but then that old woman dies. She connects with this great guy who she might end up marrying, but then it turns out that he's actually is really an enabler and the worst thing for her health. And through it all, she just has a fascination with snails that just carries her through. And it hooked me from beginning to end. I love like the journey that she goes on, and how this film just finds humor in all the right places. It punches you in the gut at just the right moments, and it's not afraid to be adult. Like, this is a film that has a lot of like sex and nudity in it, and it's very earnest about it, in very much the same way that Elliott's Mary and Max was earnest about dealing with mental health issues. It's very much in that same vein, and I think what helps the film is that it has like this very grungy kind of like earthy tone to like its weird little animation style that I think makes it just more relatable and more enticing, because there were a lot of great animated films that were beautiful, especially with like Flo and Chicken for Linda, but I just love a film like this where it's like it's not afraid to look grungy and dirty and weird and cluttered and and just, you know, filthy at times, and just and embrace it with just this kind of like this lovingly bittersweet touch to it all, that really made the film work for me. So yeah, Memoirs of a Snail is my number 10. At number 9 is Furiosa, the Mad Max saga. And what more can I say? Like, George Miller returns to Mad Max again after Fury Road, and he still hasn't lost his touch. You know, it's not just that he returns to this world and gives us more of the stuff we love, like with all the little details of the Immortan Joe characters. You get more of that, more of the convoy chases. You get more of that, more of the weird characters and the tribes that inhabit this world. You get all of that. But what makes Furiosa's film so much more, which I found a little bit more interesting than Fury Road, is that she has more of like a complete arc within this film as kind of more of like an adventure epic. Because it feels like Fury Road and Furiosa are very much different films. The fact that Fury Road is a chase, it's one chase, and it's a damn good chase. But Furiosa is all about her quest for revenge and how it takes place over the course of years, told in various chapters, and actually provides her a very meaningful ending for her journey before she hops in the convoy for the beginning of Fury Road. The way that the film leads up to that point and how she gets her satisfaction and her revenge was unique, and Anya Taylor-Joy has a fantastic performance here. But I just love how we stick with this character, because all the Mad Max films have usually been the same. You know, Max comes onto the scene, he gets his revenge, you know, he might help out some people, but then he wanders off into the desert. And here, Furiosa stays. She stays in this environment. She faces her demons. She liberates those. She is in it for the long haul, and I think that makes her a much more fascinating character to stick with. Especially, you know, if you're going to deviate from Mad Max, you got to have someone more enticing as opposed to just being, you know, a female version of Mad Max. And that very much isn't what Furiosa is, and that's what makes this film so much more different than Fury Road, and so much more exciting for what it's willing to explore with this material. Also, Chris Hemsworth as the villain here is having a ball. Like, there was never, especially for a film where you have Immortan Joe back here. He's not played by the same actor since he's died since, but even with having Immortan Joe in this film, I still looked forward to Chris Hemsworth villain in here, just because he's given just enough of a backstory to find him intriguing, but it's never treated as enough as pathos where you're sympathetic to him. He's very much a vile villain who has become almost like nihilistic to the point where he expects revenge, and it makes him so much more sinister and just so eccentric and fascinating to watch as he combats with Furiosa and everything from like shootouts at a crumbling power plant to just drag out chases through the desert. It's just fantastic dynamic between the two. George Miller's direction is still on point. It's still a fun Mad Max film. And at number 8 is the cheapest film of the year and also one of the funniest films of the year, and it's Hundreds of Beavers. The plot of this film is very simple. It's one dude who wants to win this woman's hand in marriage, but her father will not give this girl up unless this dude can bring him the pelts of hundreds of beavers. And that's all you need for like this zany film, which is all about this one dude killing hundreds of beavers in the woods with just a whole series of Looney Tunes gags. And I know that like this term gets used a lot. A lot of people will describe a film as like a live action Looney Tunes film. But I think if any live action film was more worthy of that title, it's Hundreds of Beavers. Just for having the absurdity of like all the beavers like looking like football mascots with like the fur suits and the the giant eyes, and even like when they're gutted, like they have like all this like felt guts and organs that spill out all over the place. It's all just so ridiculous and absurd. And much like Mad Max Fury Road, you're going to get a lot of people who are going to complain about this film and say, there isn't really much of a story. It's just like a series of, slapstick, Looney Tunes gags of him killing all these beavers in this darkly comedic way. And it's like, yeah, that's all the film is. And it's hilarious. Much like how Fury Road is a fantastic chase from beginning to end, this whole slaughter of beavers in this darkly comedic fashion never bored. And you would think it would, because it's just kill after kill after kill. But every level of like decapitation and trapping and murdering and accidents and wilderness explosions that unfold, it just keeps getting more clever as the film goes along. Like, it never bored me. And it was just so fascinating that this little independent film could be this uproarious and make me just like laugh so much. This is easily one of the funniest films of the year. So at number 7 is the best horror film of the year, and that's Nosferatu, the remake from Robert Eggers. And I expected Eggers to do a good job with this material, given like his past work on other films like The Northman and The Witch and The Lighthouse. But Nosferatu I found more fascinating for just like the way that Eggers edits the film and the way that he taps into like a deeper element of like how evil is perceived and how it resonates through like these various like psychosexual angles within this gothic horror setting. Because like it never makes like Count Orlok by Bill Skarsgård. It never makes him like this simplistic villain who has like this one drive. Like they establish him as just like this terrifying evil force that you don't see for most of the film. He's mostly concealed in shadows, and then he slowly starts coming out more and more as you get characters talking about him as like this great evil force. There's so many unforgettable scenes here. I love the way that the film transitions to making this feel like a nightmare, like when Thomas Hutter first approaches Orlok's castle, the way that it just kind of like fades in and out and just kind of like feels like you're going deeper and deeper into like the depths of hell to like meet with Orlok, and just tapping into like these deepest, darkest fears of these characters, and just like, realizing this is like a force that you almost can't defeat. It drew me in so much, and I found the film so fascinating for never relenting on it. And it just, and above all else, it just felt like a terrifying film. It's a very scary film. It's not like roller coaster scary, like, with like a Blumhouse type film. It's not even like campy scary. It's not even like, like social horror type of scary. It's just plain terrifying for, these characters approaching this sinister force that they don't think they can stop. And it's delightfully scary. I love the way that it taps into just all like the darkest fears of humanity, and it doesn't relent. And it's also just beautiful and just a fantastic cast overall. And another fantastic cast was in my number 6 pick is Dune Part 2, Denis Villeneuve finishing off the first Dune novel, and he does not disappoint. He does very much what I expected him to do, but also a little bit more. And I think that's what makes me love Part 2 a little bit more than Part 1, is just that Villeneuve recognizes, the aspects of this adaptation where he does have to kind of like retool and trim, but also keeps the thematic focus firm on Paul's ascent to power, not being one that's fully aspirational, but one that's cautious and questioned. And I think it's beautifully explored by the way we get to focus more on Chani, played by Zendaya, who questions how Paul Atreides, once more played by Timothée Chalamet, is rising to power and using all of the faith of the Fremen to kind of like build himself back up to becoming this messiah of Arrakis. And the way that it proceeds, like, it's exciting. It's got some grand moments of, him riding the sandworm, of course. That's a crucial moment you have to get right, especially since there isn't a lot of it described in the book. It's mostly like you have to go off your own imagination, and Villeneuve does not disappoint in that department. Great cast as well, for bringing like Christopher Walken and Florence Pugh into this, for the few times that they're on screen, they dominate. And it's just, it takes everything that I loved about the novel and just, pumps it up with a greater emphasis on what needs to be explored and understood from the book, which makes it so much better as it makes it as both like a faithful adaptation and an adaptation where Villeneuve is willing to put his own mark on it. So we're not just getting a straight transition, from the book to the screen. We're actually getting, someone who understands the material and wants to say something more about it, as opposed to just, going off the text verbatim. If Villeneuve did that, it would still be a pretty good film, but the fact that he can find something deeper to explore and still make it look cinematic is just fantastic. So yeah, it's very much everything I wanted to see in a Dune film, and I think Villeneuve has confirmed, with this film that he has made the best adaptation of Frank Herbert's original novel. And at number 5, we have Luca Guadagnino's Challengers. And I was debating between Challengers and Guadagnino's other film, Queer, this year. But, Challengers is just, it's so exciting. Like Queer was really great as kind of like a slow burn, surreal romance. But Challengers as kind of like this intense battle of like sex and tennis and ambition. It just locked me in. I love the way that it proceeds. I love the performances here from Josh O'Connor and Mike Feist, who are both competing over Zendaya because they think they are competing for sex here, when in truth Zendaya is competing for tennis. She doesn't really love either of these guys. She just wants to see a great match out of both of them. And as the film goes along, it becomes more about her just wanting to force these two guys to basically just kiss already, to, relieve the sexual tension there, because you can see it everywhere in this film. And I guess like that's the best way to describe the film. It's just intense. Everything from like the tennis match that frames the entire film is incredibly shot, from like the close-ups to like the POV of the ball, to just zooming in on Zendaya when the ball bats back and forth, and just the way it's cut really quickly and excitedly. And even just like Reznor and Ross's score is fantastic here, because it feels like another character in the room. Like at one point, O'Connor and Feist are like they're in a sauna, and there's sexual tension between them. But then in comes the Reznor Ross soundtrack, which amps up more and more and more. It's like, is the soundtrack another like part of this love affair that we need to get? Because it really does feel like, like the music is fighting to get in on this sexual tension too. And just for being that intense and exciting, and also just absurd enough and hilarious in certain scenes, for finding just the right moments of humor in between the dramatic intensity of everything here, is just such a fantastic balancing act that I love the way that Guadagnino assembles this film, and I think it for sure is going to be one of my favorites of the director for many years. It depends. I don't know. I'll have to wait to see what Guadagnino does next. But yeah, Challengers is just I had a ball with this film. So at number 4 is Nickel Boys, which told the story of two boys who were at a Florida reform school in the 1960s, in which they experienced the worst of racism during that era. Now, this type of film could feel like it was like a trauma dump. From, like there have been so many films like this which have focused on like the trauma that comes with historic racism. But what I love so much about Nickel Boys is that it doesn't just focus on that aspect. Like, I mean, like for one though, I do love the way that the film is shot. The film, when we're at the reform school, it's entirely from the POV of these two characters, and I mean that literally. We see everything that they see, like when the kid arrives, when the first character we follow arrives at this reform school, we sit with him in the car. We have that uncomfortable realization that when they take the other kids out of the car, that he's not going to be taken to the better part of this school. He's going to be taken to the worst part, and that he's going to be stuck there, and there's going to be no way for him out of this. And then later, when he meets another character that he connects with, we see his POV as well. But in addition to that, the film is also nonlinear, because then it jumps ahead in time, where we get a third-person view of one of the survivors of the school, and just trying to deal with his past and kind of like try to, uncover the details of what went wrong in that history. And then we get another perspective that's almost kind of like a scattershot, like documentary approach of just showing us the evidence of everything that's uncovered from this reform school, and just thinking about everything that surrounded it, and everything that made these characters over this course of time. In addition to that, it's just beautifully assembled with like the music, to the point where there are certain points in the film where it just like takes a detour to the stars, and almost kind of like has like this almost little bit of like a Terrence Malick thing going on, where it feels like we're trying to get a better sense of just like life itself, as opposed to just focusing on like this narrow view of history and like the trauma that comes with that 1960s racism, which the film does focus on. And is beautifully, it unfolds like beautifully. Like you feel the anger and the frustration, and just like even like little moments of just realizing that there's you're constantly on the defense in this scenario. Like the way that that the characters slowly realize that even though they try to have appeals, they just go on deaf ears, and it gets to a point where like something as simple as just like the cutting of the cake becomes like almost like nostalgic, and feels like it's saying something more for especially like, I mean, obviously with like the context that it happens within, because it feels like the last slice of cake that's going to be eaten before this kid goes off to reform school. But just like the close-ups of it, and just focusing on those little moments, and how the soundtrack plays off it as well, it feels like this all-encompassing film, not just about historic racism and just like the lingering trauma of the past, but just life in general, with the way that it's set up here. And it's just like it's a fantastic it's a fantastic assembly here, that it feels like it could have just been like a simplistic drama, and it never does. It always feels like it's trying to say something much more grand, and always nails it in just the right ways with like this nonlinear storytelling. So yeah, Nickel Boys is something else. Like it was one of those films where I watched it and I felt like, like almost like I was like transported to another place. Like I was taken out of my body while I was watching this film. And I'm not just saying that just because like, where you're literally in the body of another character for this. And like, there are scenes where you're just taking trips to the stars. Like you're thrown all around the place, but hey, that's the great appeal about movies, is you can place yourself in someone else's shoes, and Nickel Boys is one of the best examples of trying to feel that empathy. And at number 3, we have The Brutalist. This is a towering American epic about a Hungarian Jewish immigrant, Laszlo Toth, played by Adrian Brody, who quickly realizes that America, that American dream you're fighting for is not going to be easy, and it's going to be met with a lot of bigotry and greed, and so many aspects that are going to pin you down and hold you down, possibly for the rest of your life. Now, I was expecting this film to be good, but I wasn't expecting it to explore so much. And I mean, like I did expect Brody's performance to be really good, and it is. But the way that Brady Corbet directs this film is just like it's beautiful and grotesque at the same time. For one, I love like the big structure that Toth is building throughout this film. Like he's tasked with building this community center that's going to have some representation of faith within it, which is going to be like his magnum opus. But every frustration that he endures along the way makes building this grand epic that much more troublesome, and he faces all these problems of anti-Semitism and bigotry and the issues of capitalism and power dynamics, and how like his family is mistreated, and his drug addiction, and the problems with his family being taken advantage of, and just all of these compounding factors that just makes him boil over with frustration, and you feel it in every scene here. I especially love the way that the music complements off this film too as well. Like when you start listening to the music, it feels like it's building to something, in much in the way that like Toth is building this community center, but then it always goes like a little bit off key, where you can like almost, where it feels like you're building something, and then you start seeing the cracks in the foundation, and you start seeing pieces of it fall off, and that struggle to patch it all back together, and just, you know, that frustration of realizing, you know, when parts of it fall down, you got to build it back up again, and you got to keep fighting, and it has to keep going longer and longer and longer, which is why I feel like the 3.5 hours that this film runs for is perfectly warranted, because you feel every single pressure that Toth has. Like you feel him get kicked down, and then he gets like another chance, but then gets kicked again. It always feels like he's taking one step up the ladder and then 2 steps down, and just getting like, he just explodes at one point with anger at his wife about how, you know, like when he was in Hungary, like he was a revered architect, and here in America, his talents are just squandered over everything. There are moments of great beauty in this film, as when Toth visits this quarry of this stone that he's going to use in the building. It's just a wondrous, amazing sight. It's just as beautiful as like when you do see the actual community center being built. But then you transition from like that quarry scene to a scene of him drinking with Harrison, the guy who commissioned him, who is played by Guy Pearce, and Harrison just flat out rapes him, and it is horrifying and shocking, and he doesn't answer for it. He just says that, you know, I can do this, I have this power, and, you know, I hate the fact that you have this ability, and I'm going to take advantage of you. He doesn't say that exactly, but it's very much implied, and the fallout that happens after that, with how he's approached, and how basically Harrison doesn't answer for this atrocity that he's committed. It feels very, very somber, but also there's a little bit of like a sobering element to it as well. Like it's just fantastic drama, and it's so intricately well built that I almost had to, like, I had to look this up. Like, is this based on somebody or some place or some event? And no, it's not. This is an entirely original historical drama by Brady Corbet, and it's mesmerizing. Like I could not stop thinking about this film. And at number 2, we have the film Sing Sing. This is the film about the rehabilitation through the arts program at the Sing Sing maximum security prison. Now, there's a lot to love about this film. Like, aside from the fact that that this program actually does exist, and not only does it exist, but people who have engaged in this program actually do appear in this film, playing themselves, which I found just amazing. And the fact that they're allowed to inhabit the spotlight for a bit was actually pretty cool. Now, on a technical level, yeah, that's cool, and that's great with that relation to reality. But I think what makes the film even better is having Coleman Domingo in this fantastic performance as Divine G, who's part of the program as one of like the most cultured members of the program. Like, he's familiar with plays and scripts, and he can also like pen original scripts of his own. But he's also a little bit cautious about wanting to, to put himself out there, and has his doubts, especially with how like his appeals are denied, and how he feels like he's trapped and dealing with like the death of inmates. It's too much to bear for him. But he also has like a good eye for casting, because then he takes an interest in this other inmate called Divine I, who's actually played by the real life person who goes by this name of Clarence Macklin, and he realized that, Divine I, he can see there's something with this guy, because even though he's not that good of an actor, like, he needs a lot of work when they start rehearsing for this play they're going to put on in prison. But the fact that this guy picked up King Lear when talking about like the play, like, Divine G is like, there's something to this guy. This guy picked up King Lear and decided to read it. I think maybe we can mold him. And just watching Divine I kind of, slowly get more into the role was great. But while at the same time watching Divine G also kind of crumble, and the two men rely on each other. Because there's a lot to love in this film. There's good drama. There's great acting, especially from like the real life people who have been in like this type of program here. But just the connection between men, and the way that they kind of like try to support each other and reveal more about themselves and show like the vulnerable side of themselves in a way that feels natural and not mocking, but also not melodramatic. It just has this refreshing level of like sincere realism to it, that I think perfectly plays off like the real life program that they do reference in the film. Especially when you have like Paul Rossi, who comes in as the coordinator for this play, and he just, Paul Rossi, he was from Sound of Metal too. He plays a similar role here of just coming into the room and bringing everyone together and just, having this easygoing nature of just getting everyone comfortable enough to open up in a way that is believable. That, cause even if you were skeptical, you would sit down with this guy, and after a while you would start opening up to him with how easy and how like gentle, but also earnest and a little bit tough he is with these guys. That the connection that these characters have is just so strong, and I found that fascinating, because there are a few films that I've seen in the past few years that have just such a strong male friendship connection that is not played up so much as a joke or as melodrama. And here, the connection is so strong, and just all that revealing nature and the vulnerabilities and all the frustrations and the honesty that comes from these characters. It's just so beautiful and so profound. And I was reading this study that said that Gen Z wants to see more platonic relationships within films. Like they would like to see more of those relationships in movies. And if that's the case, I would say go straight to Sing Sing. This is like exhibit A I would use of forming a strong platonic bond between these characters. Because like it tends to happen where like there is a strong enough male bond where you're almost thinking like, oh, are these characters going to kiss? Is there like homoerotic tension going on between them? And this film, it doesn't really feel like it. Feels like it very much is a solid foundational platonic friendship, which I think is a little bit of like of a trickier route to navigate without just kind of like stumbling into like, like it's too melodramatic, it's trying to be like too, vulnerable with these characters, or going too high where like it becomes to a point where just like, well, you two just like kiss already. And there never is that moment. It always feels like it's men at their lowest trying to connect with each other, and they just have a strong bond that it made me love the film so much. It has such a huge heart. So my number one pick for the year is Sean Baker's Anora. And I usually love Sean Baker's films, and I expected to love Anora, but not to the degree that Sean Baker stages this film, mostly because like it felt like an unpredictable film, but also a gorgeous film, and just a film with fire inside it, just because of Mikey Madsen's performance here as Annie, as this stripper who tries to, getting good with like this rich Russian guy and marries him, only to be placed in the worst situation, where the Russian kid's family comes to force this marriage to be annulled, but the Russian dude runs off, and so Annie now has to be drug around New York with these Russian goons trying to find this guy and get the marriage annulled. And it would feel like, Mikey's at her worst here, but it always feels like she's in control. Like, even when, like, she's being forced to do everything here, she is just bitter and angry and controls the situation. And if she can't, like, attack, like, physically, she'll attack verbally. And there is never a moment where you're not rooting for her. You're just like, yes, she's just trying to struggle to get by, to get some money, to negotiate her way into having a comfortable life. And she will fight for it. She will fight so hard here. And Madison's performance just feels so real for this scenario, because like if you were in this situation too, you'd be frustrated and angry and want to like just shout back and fight back against like, like these people who are basically like rich doofuses who have no idea what they're doing, who are just such idiots, and they need to be called out. And Annie never wastes a moment to humiliate these people, to just call them out, to roll her eyes at them, to just look down on them because they deserve to be looked down upon, where even if they do get what they want in the end, Annie always feels like she's still fighting, like she still has the upper hand, like she still gets in the last word. She is just fighting back against what seems like, like the most towering forces in her life that she has no hope of conquering. And you feel for her, you love her fighting, and it's just Madsen's performance is here, just like, it is so intoxicating. I couldn't get enough of her. Especially the way that she subverts this. There's a moment set up where it feels like she's going to have a romantic connection with one of the goons, and she just shoots it down. In fact, she shoots it down multiple times, proving that, no, I am not going to be so simplistic and find some, silver lining here. This situation sucks. And I'm going to tell you that it sucks, and I'm going to call it out that it sucks, and I'm going to fight back any chance I get in this film. And that's why I loved Honora so much. I loved how it just kept getting more twisty and absurd, and like, you feel for her, it's very somber, but it's also just flat out hilarious at times. Not to mention, Sean Baker shot this film in 35mm, and the way that he shoots New York, and even like Las Vegas, is just amazing, just fantastically gorgeous, and like he gets almost this very like retro quality out of it. So yeah, it's an amazing film to look at, and it's a fantastic film to follow, and just the performance by Mikey Madsen is the reason to watch, and she dominates this film. I couldn't get enough of this movie, and I felt like everything that it embodied with like her fury and her frustration, I felt just made it the perfect film from 2024. Quick little honorable mentions here, because this was a tough year for trying to assemble a top 10. Because I could easily do a top 20, because here are a few other honorable mentions from this year. The People's Joker, Love Lies Bleeding, Kinds of Kindness, the new Yorgos Lanthimos film. Queer, I did mention with Luca Guadagnino. Small Things Like These, which was a quiet but somber drama about the how do I put this? The insidious nature of like the Catholic Church in a small town. Great performance by Cillian Murphy there, one of my favorites of his. Flow, I mentioned. Rebel Ridge, fantastic action film from James Saulnier. The Seed of the Sacred Fig, great film about attacking Tehran's theocracy and how it brutalizes women and doesn't answer for those crimes. Great film, must watch. Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat was my favorite documentary of last year, and I didn't expect it to be, because I thought it was just going to be like a routine documentary about how the Republic of Congo was dismantled and targeted by the UN, which was an important film, but having it framed almost kind of like as a music video, with great typography and just like great editing, it ingrains you in that struggle, makes you care about it. Fantastic film. Also, Opus, the last film of Sakaguchi, great composer. Kneecap was a great Irish rap biopic. Fantastic movie. Definitely one of my favorite international films of the past year. Daughters, I would say, is a great documentary double feature to have with Sing Sing, because while Sing Sing was about rehabilitation through a play, Daughters is all about a father-daughter dance to help incarcerated men reconnect with their daughters. A great double feature there. So if you do watch Sing Sing and you want something similar to watch after it that relates more to reality, watch Daughters. It's a great documentary. And another great documentary to recommend is The Remarkable Life of Ibelin, which tells the story of a World of Warcraft player who had such an impact on a community that when he died, the players of the game came together to show their support. And it's beautifully communicated by portraying the events through a recreation of the game environment, which I thought was a little bit of a gamble, but it made the film work, and it made it so much more poignant. So there you go. Those were the top 10 films of this year. And if you want to, I'll do a quick rundown here for those who might have missed it here. At number 10, I had Memoirs of a Snail. Number 9, Furiosa, Mad Max Saga. Number 8, Hundreds of Beavers. Number 7, Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. At number 6, Dune Part 2. Number 5, Luca Guadagnino's Challengers. Number 4, Nickel Boys. Number 3, The Brutalist. At number 2, Sing Sing. And at number 1, Honora. So there you go. Top 10 films of that year.